Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another stream with the Satin Dolls. We are so happy to see you today. My name is Dixie. I am the dance captain and assistant producer for the Satin Dolls, and we have a very, very special show today. We are just over the moon because we have Patricia Ward Kelly here with us today on our live stream. And for those of you tuning in today, Patricia is the wife of the incomparable, incredible, iconic Gene Kelly. And as dancers, you might imagine how excited we are to speak with her today. We've already chatted with her a little bit, and we can't wait to hear. She's already told us some incredible stories, so I can't wait to hear what she has to say. We're so grateful to you, Patricia, for agreeing to spend some time with us today. If you have any questions for Patricia, please drop them in our comments below. We'll be asking her about Gene's legacy, her own projects, and sprinkling in some performances from our dolls from Gene Kelly's most noteworthy films. So, Patricia, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm happy, and this is such a pleasure to be with all of you. It's especially since half of you are in the UK and we've got some in the US. It's just nice to have all of us together.
Yeah, we've definitely before we were all in this pandemic situation, very rarely were we all on the same streams together. We didn't really know the girls from the other troops, so we really enjoyed connecting as a group over these live streams. So,
well, fire away. I'm all ready. Anything.
All right. Well, let's get to it. Can you tell us and the viewers about the work that you do for Gene Kelly's legacy, as well as the shows you tour with and the book that you're working on? Can you just give us a little overview?
And may I just interject, just in order to lead into that, if I tell you how Gene and I got together, because then that kind of explains those things. So
that would be lovely.
And it's an embarrassingly funny story because unlike all of you, I did not know who Gene Kelly was when I met him. So I was a writer on a television special about the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. And the host narrator was someone named Gene Kelly. And all of the people were going crazy about this. And they kept talking about this thing called Singing in the Rain that was to die for. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And so but I wasn't going to reveal my ignorance. So I just didn't say anything. And I was a very nerdy Herman Melville scholar. I was in American literature and was thoroughly determined to be a tenured professor in a university somewhere. And I spent all of my time in a library, just in a book. And I always say I always get excited about a semicolon. I mean, I was as nerdy as you can get. And so Gene, everyone on this set was trying to get at Gene, especially the women, because they were so convinced that they could get a marriage proposal out of him during this week that we had together. So the director, who was a lovely guy, decided that he would put me in the room with Gene to keep all of the other women away from him. And so at this point, I'm almost back to it now. Usually I have really short blonde hair. I look like Annie Lennox, but now you can see I'm going back. I'm a brunette, so it's going back to that in the pandemic. But I had this really long brown hair, and I was wearing a man's lumber jacket, and I had corduroy pants on that were that short, high water pants and clogs and no makeup. And I came into the room and he looks at me. I don't think he'd ever seen anything quite like me. And it turned out that my pet studies in graduate school were etymology. It was word origins and poetry. And those just happened to be Gene's pet studies too. So we just sat there in this room together playing word games and quoting poetry back and forth. And by the middle of the week, I was completely enchanted. I mean, this man was drop dead gorgeous. And And he spoke French, he spoke Italian, he spoke Yiddish, he read Latin. He very often read a book a day. He was an economics major. He was the true Renaissance man. And so by Wednesday, I was just gone. And at the end of the week, on Friday, he gave me a little piece of paper that had his phone number on it, and I gave him my phone number, and we walked outside the museum, and he kissed me quite passionately, and I was kind of taken aback, and he got in a limousine, and I'd never seen one of those before either. I was such a, and he drove away, and this woman next to me says, "That guy's really famous." I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Yeah, go down to the video store and ask for Gene Kelly." And I did. And like 48 movies later, I came back and I watched him just back to back. And I just thought, how did I miss this person? And he called me about 6 months later and asked me if I would come out to California. He said he had some writing projects to do. And so I got on a plane and came out here, and he asked me at the end of the weekend, he asked me if I would write his memoir with him. And so I said yes. And I remember calling my mother from the airport, and I said, "Well, Gene Kelly asked me to write his memoir." And she said, "Well, what did you say?" And I said, "Well, I said yes, And so I thought I was coming out for about 2 weeks to interview him, but I ended up recording him in some fashion nearly every day for over 10 years. And we got married. It took him 5 years to ask me to marry him, but we got married 5 years into that project. And so after he died, I was so discombobulated, and I really wasn't in the right frame of mind to work on the book. And I eventually created a one-woman show that it premiered at the Academy of Motion Pictures. They always did a tribute to their legends who would have been 100. And in 2012, Gene would have been 100. And so I went to them and I asked, because Gene was so specific about how he wanted to be remembered. He wanted to be remembered for being behind the camera, not so much in front of the camera, but as a director and choreographer. And so I created this evening, and to their credit, they let me do it. And then that just began, and that's been touring for 8 years. And then I created a big live symphony tribute to him that premiered in Scotland in 2018. And we went to Ireland last year. And it's a 70-piece orchestra on stage with me and the conductor. And then we play the music live to the clips. And we've preserved Gene's singing voice and his taps. And so that was all scheduled for this year and next year. And those have been postponed a little bit, but they'll be out. We'll get those out. So as a result of being locked down here in Los Angeles, I thought, well, this is a perfect time to get back to the book, because I've never had the luxury of concentrated time. And it's too bad it's in this pandemic, but it is great. And really, I turned 61 in January, and it's really interesting how my 61-year-old brain looks at things versus how my 26-year-old brain looked at things. And I'm able to see different patterns and things. So I think it really was, this is the right time to finish the book. I feel strong enough to finish the book. I wasn't strong enough before. I couldn't. It's quite emotional to deal with it, to hear his voice again, to read his words, to see his handwriting. It all packs a real punch. But I think now is a perfect time to get that out, and then it'll be available with hope when I do get back on the road. So that's in a nutshell, that's kind of how things came together. I mean, it's the actor Roddy McDowall, some of you might know from National Velvet with Elizabeth Taylor, and he was very kind and invited me over to his house for dinners after Gene died. And they were these wonderful eclectic dinners. You'd have Elizabeth Taylor on one side of you, and you'd have Johnny Depp on another. I mean, it was he just always put together these fanciful dinner parties. They were very simple but fun, because he mixed all kinds of people. But his response to my coming to California is, he said, "Oh, my dear," he said, "you were like Alice falling down the rabbit hole." And I was like, this was not my world. I wasn't a Hollywood. I didn't aspire to come to Hollywood, and I ended up here. So anyway, that's a long way around to answer your question.
Oh no, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. What a way to start our stream. It's so wonderful. Like, I just love like hearing all about that and your story and how you met. I mean, that's so. Where are you originally from?
Fort Collins, Colorado. So I and then I went to undergraduate school at a wonderful liberal arts college called Colorado College, and then went to graduate school at the University of Virginia. So I was just thoroughly intent. I worked in Chicago. The Melville collection is at the Newberry Library in Chicago. So I worked there and had a very academic background. But interestingly, it was really helpful for me with the work that I'm doing, because I remember one of my overseeing professors in Chicago, the first thing he said to me was, "Never trust the printed word." And I always trusted. I figured, you open a book and it's factual. I mean, it's in print. Somebody had to do their homework. And what I found was that very rarely is something accurate. And he really encouraged me to go to primary sources always. And so that's what I've done with the work about Gene, because Gene's memory was phenomenal. He remembered, for example, he said it took a day and a half to shoot the iconic Singing in the Rain sequence. And so I thought, okay, well, I trust him, but as a journalist, I need to double check that. So I went to the USC library, where they have the Arthur Freed collection, and they have production notes that list per minute what was done on the shoot. I mean, because it was a business, 2 different people had to record every minute of the day. And so it says, quite literally, I'm not joking, it says, say from 9:32 to 9:35, Gene Kelly changed pants due to let loose cuff, or 9:33 to 9:34, Gene Kelly retied left shoe. And those are in the notes. And so I went there, and sure enough, a day and a half to shoot that iconic number. So generally, I think he was spot on, because he's not only starring in the picture, but he's directing and choreographing. So he had to be in charge of the budget, the schedule, all the rehearsals, and he had to get in front of that camera. So the great Rita Moreno, who plays Zelda in Singing in the Rain, she and I went on tour for the 60th anniversary of Singing in the Rain. She's hilarious. She's so funny. She comes to about here on me, and she couldn't believe I didn't know who Gene Kelly was. She'd just sit there and look at me like, she just thought that was really funny. But since she didn't have a huge role in the picture, she said she went every day just to watch the filming because it was so extraordinary. And she said that Gene was in constant motion. He would be behind the camera, setting the lights, setting the camera angles. Then he'd leap down in front of the camera. He'd go change into his costume, shoot a take. And for the Sing in the Rain number, one factual thing is that he did have a very high fever when he shot it. So it is true that he had a temperature of about 103. And so what he would do, it was all done on the set. So it was all black tarpaulin that was draped, and then they had rigging that was for the water. And what he would do is shoot the take, and then he'd go outside of the black tarpaulin and lie on the sidewalk and just try to bake the fever out of him. And then they'd reset the lights, go back in and do. You'll read that they did it in one take. They didn't do it in one take. They did them in very long takes. So you'll see. I mean, a lot of times people can't even see the cut, and Gene usually cut on a turn, so you don't notice it as much. And you'll also read the myth that they put milk in the water, so you see the raindrops. There's no milk in the water. It's just phenomenal cinematography and lighting, because they had to backlight the rain so that you could see it against the plate glass windows. And so what I loved about Rita was that she just said she was the one who helped convey that he's performing all these different roles. And Leslie Caron said the same thing about American Paris, particularly the ballet. People said, "Oh, that was Vincent Minnelli behind the camera," and she said, "Oh no, it was Gene Kelly behind the camera." And so I appreciate that, because that's how he truly wanted to be remembered. I mean, he's pretty cute up there on the screen, but he wanted us to remember him for the creative side of things.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize about his films, is that he was so much involved in the creating of, the directing and the choreography and everything like that. They just see him on the screen and think, oh, he's an actor and dancer and he's just up there, doing his work. But he's also behind. I think that's hardest, is when you're having to go back and forth between those two. So that's wonderful. Actually, that's a great segue, because we're actually going to chat a little bit about Singing in the Rain right now. That's our first, we're going to be performing a few numbers from Singing in the Rain. We all obviously grew up watching and dancing to him, as in my case anyway, in my living room. My grandmother loved showing me old Gene Kelly films, so I grew up watching them from when I was probably 5 years old. But actually the main inspiration for creating the Satin Dolls in 2005 was the All I Dream of You chorus girl scene. Our producer grew up watching that, and it was classic and cheerful, and it gave her the idea to create a group and it was actually the first number that the Satin Dolls ever performed. So we feel very connected to him. So, and speaking of Singing in the Rain, Savannah, I believe you have a question about the movie.
Yes, I just want to say a massive thank you, Patricia, for joining us today. From all the dolls as well, we are so grateful that you can join us. Patricia and I actually connected online, and she so graciously agreed to be a part of this live stream today. So I think it's for everyone a bit of a pinch me moment, like, is it really real? So just a massive thank you. My little question is, because you said so much already, were there any little stories or anecdotes that Gene used to reminisce about when, after filming Singing in the Rain or any of these movies?
One of the things that people they don't notice when he's dancing, they don't notice that there are no taps on the bottom of his shoes. So they're always asking, like, how did they shoot the numbers? How did they do this? And what they did is they recorded the music first, and Gene was involved with that. He went and was there with the big MGM orchestra. It's when you listen to the music in the films, I mean, it's an extraordinary group of musicians. And so he went there, recorded that, and then they all performed to a playback. So they're these big lily horns, they call them, these kind of speakers that would play, and they would perform, and then they would do the number, and then Gene had to go in and dub his taps after. So he hated it. He hated doing tap numbers in the movies, he said, because it was so hard to do this. He'd have to go in and put a headset on and go in this booth and watch himself on screen and absolutely recreate what he did. And he had to do it for the non-dancers, like a Debbie Reynolds also dubbed their taps as well. And again, with this kind of mythology, you'll read that Gene didn't dub his own taps. I mean, I just to confirm, I mean, the thing is, Gene just didn't lie about stuff. He wasn't a guy who embellished the stories. I mean, he knew technically how everything was done, and so he would explain that to me, how things were done. He wasn't adding to the picture, because I think in a way it's pretty phenomenal anyway that they did these pictures. You don't really have to add anything to it. They're pretty grand. And so I called after Gene died, because everybody was publishing these books and accounts saying that Gene didn't dub his taps. And so I called the sound engineer, Bill Saraceno. It was it was quite a blue conversation. He let loose with a big array of comments about that. And he said, absolutely, I was there with him when he recorded everything. And he said that Gene said it was very hard. For example, in Singing in the Rain, what is the sound of tap dancing in rain? And so he did have his assistants. He with Carol Haney and Jeannie Coyne went in and experimented with all different kinds of shoes on different surfaces and trying to create the tap. What it turned out is that they used standard metal taps, and then Bill Saraceno added this kind of squish sound for the water. So, it's what else would there be? Somebody just published something online today saying, oh, I just learned that Gene Kelly didn't really do his own stunts. And I'm just like, I hate this stuff. I keep going like, no, that's not true. I'm sorry, and I said, Gene did have a stuntman in Singing in the Rain, but the only stunt that stuntman did was, Gene always said that he couldn't really use a stuntman because everything that he did, the audience would recognize if it was another body or it was another movement, because the stuntmen were trained differently than Gene was trained. Gene was trained as a classical ballet dancer and as a gymnast and as an acrobat. And he had a body that was a certain type of body, and he had a certain type of movement. So, for example, in Anchors Aweigh, people say that he isn't the one swinging across. It's absolutely Gene swinging all the distance across, because he said, I had to do it if the audience would detect that I was not doing it. So the only things that Gene would not do in The Three Musketeers, when you see him riding a horse it was actually shot right here at Leo Carrillo Beach. They're on the beach on the sand here with the horses. And so many of Gene's friends had broken their backs riding horses, so many actors. And Gene just said it's just too dangerous and to be out riding on that sand. So in the long shots, it's not Gene. On the close-ups, it's Gene. And I'm going to reveal something that I don't usually reveal, because part of it is too, you want to kind of keep this a little bit of mystery about it. But the one thing in Singing in the Rain that this guy named Russell Saunders did do is that, when Gene jumps up on the trolley that's moving and he runs along the top of it, that is Gene. But it is Russell Saunders who jumps into the moving car that is Debbie Reynolds driving. But so that Gene, if he figured it would be too dangerous, he wouldn't do it. But more important, it would only be something that he could get away with, that the audience wouldn't go, oh God, that's not Gene doing that. And nobody knows that that's not Gene dropping down in. So that's an example of the kind of artifice in it.
That's so amazing. There's so many different stories.
Oh,
Could talk for hours.
Can I tell you one other thing about it? For example, Gene always thought Donald O'Connor was one of the greatest improvisational comedians of all time. And Gene said that Gene felt that the Moses Supposes number, the tap number, was the best tap number that he ever did on film. He thought Broadway Melody with Eleanor Powell and Astaire was the best that somebody else did on film, 1948, 49. But Moses Supposes, so when you watch this, when you watch it again, Gene said that all of the funny faces that Donald O'Connor made at the beginning with behind the speech teacher, that was not in the script. And so he's standing there and just started doing these things, and Gene is losing it. And so Gene said that goes in. So that was Donald's contribution. And there are points where you can see Gene just kind of, he's losing it because he's watching. I mean, Donald would just keep doing different things. And same with the Make 'em Laugh number. Donald would, there's a lot of time in filmmaking. People think it's this really glamorous thing, but as you all know, there's a lot of time where nothing is happening, where you're just sitting because it takes time to relight something or redo something. And so Donald would just start picking up stuff on the set, and he'd start making these, the dummies and little things, and he'd start putting on these little performances for Jean's assistants, and everybody's cracking up. And so then they'd go in the next day and they'd go, Donald, do that thing you did yesterday. And he couldn't remember anything he did. And so Jean had his assistants, Jeannie Coyne and Carol Haney, write down everything that Donald did. And then Jean strung it together. He had got Arthur Freed to do this new number, Make 'em Laugh, which sounds very much like Be a Clown, unfortunately. But then Jean just strung it together, and that was that number. And the only thing in that was kind of complicated was that Donald had lost his confidence to do the backflips against the wall. He used to do them. He was a vaudeville performer when he was born. He was born in a trunk. And so they had to bring his brother back on to help retrain him to get the confidence to do that. But that's how these things kind of came about, kind of organically, that it just was, I mean, you have these brilliant people. You have a brilliant team of writers with Comden and Green. I mean, the wit is so contemporaneous. I mean, it's so current. Nobody looks at it and goes, oh, that's kind of old. So anyway, I'm going on too long.
I think that's the beauty of all of these films. They're just timeless. You can't, then they've got no age to them at all. And I think that's why it's so important that we keep them so current, because I think every film nowadays stems from that, especially things like La La Land, and that you can't recreate the best films from back then, but they're a base for ones that they want to make today, which is great. So I'm going to do a little dance to Singing in the Rain. Taking on the big one. And we normally perform this one with a band called the Jive Aces, because they have their own little version of it. And we wear a little red and white striped top with some navy blue shorts. And what none of us knew when we put this outfit together was that in the Singing in the Rain video, like if you watch it on YouTube or in the film, Jean stopped at a window, and in the window there's a little pin-up girl, and she's wearing a red and white stripy top and blue shorts, and we never knew this. It was such a coincidence. So like, that's sticking. We're always going to wear that when we perform this number. So I'm going to give that a go now. I'm going to set you up and do a little bit of
All right, Savannah, take it away. We're looking forward to hearing some tapping from you.
Come on with the rain, I will smile on my face. With a happy face, singing in the rain, dance in the rain. I'm happy again. Singing, dancing in the singing in the rain.
Oh, Savannah!
Thank you.
You couldn't rig any rain in your house?
It's raining inside in my head.
I love that. I love that because so often people do try to do a literal translation of what Gene did, and it never works because everybody looks at it and goes, "It's not Gene Kelly." And I love this because it's such a beautiful interpretation of it, and it's a very feminine interpretation. It's a very it's very fun and it's so appropriate for you. So I really love that, and he would love that because don't imitate me. Do something new. Take what I did and go beyond. You don't need to see another attempt at being Gene Kelly. But what's great to take it forward is to take the essence and do something else. So I think that's great. And just to your point about the timelessness of the films, Gene said, he said, it's very hard to create something that is both contemporary and timeless. And so he was always conscious of that and maybe that's why we're still watching these movies 68, 70 plus years after. So I think that is fantastic. I think it's just great. Congratulations.
Thank you. That means so much.
All right, so I have a question for you now. So you touched a little bit about his creative process, but myself and most of the girls who are in the dolls are dancers, choreographers, creators. Can you give us any insight into his creative process? Like, how did he create these iconic dances that we're still watching and loving all these years later?
Yes, I can, because I was always, I couldn't create a dance if you paid me $1 million. It's not in my, I just can't. I don't envision that kind of thing. I can write anything. I can describe something, but I can't create movement out of thin air. And so Gene said to me that, he said people always imagine that he got up on the stage and just kind of wiggled around, that's how he came up with his ideas. And it's not that at all. A lot of choreographers do that. It's kind of amazing. They get up and then they work with the dancers and it's all kind of this big collaborative thing. And that wasn't it for Gene at all. He said he actually created them much more like a writer. He sat down with a yellow legal pad at night often, and he sat in a chair and he wrote it out. And I asked him, I said, what came first for you? Does the music come first or does the dance come first? And he said, for me, the dance came first. And then except there were two exceptions. One is the Slaughter on 10th Avenue ballet, where the music kind of dictated the movement, and also the American Paris ballet, because they were fairly limited in how they could adjust the music of that. But otherwise, Gene would he essentially wrote a story in his head. He knew it had to go from A, B to C. And then he would go into the rehearsal hall with an arranger. The arrangers are kind of the unsung heroes in those movies. You hear about a George Gershwin, but you don't hear about a Conrad Salinger or a Roger Edens. And these are the guys that are right there, and they are the ones, for example, with Singing in the Rain, the opening of it that you hear and you go, oh, I know what that is. That's not in the original music. So Gene's whole idea about choreography, what he wanted to do was not only change the look of dance on film with the costume and the style of dance, but he also wanted the dance to propel the plot. He wanted it to be part of the story, versus before Gene, if you look at the musicals, generally they go and they tell a story, it goes along, and then it stops, and then they perform this number on a stage. Generally they're performers, they perform the number on the stage, and then that ends, and then they go back to the story. So you can literally cut those numbers out of the movie and it doesn't change the story. Jean's whole idea is that the movement tells the story, and probably Sing in the Rain is a great example of that, because what better way to say that you're in love, and to have this kind of childlike delight and joy than you kiss the girl, you wave off the cab, and you dance and sing in the rain. But the way that he created it, if he just suddenly turned around and burst into song, it would be a little bit weird. And that's what he always thought was strange, is that characters are suddenly just going, on stage, and it doesn't fit with the story. But so Jean had Roger Eden sat at a piano. Jean said, I need a way to get into this number. And so Roger Edens gave him that vamp and just plunked that out on a piano. And that's the perfect way, because you get that entrance, and then Jean starts to sing and dance, and nobody thinks that's odd at all. In fact, everybody around the world does it whenever it rains. That's the first thing they think. So it was much more of a storytelling process than it was just kind of creating movement to music, which is different. Say a ballet company does more of the creating movement to music, and Jean was creating the story, and then the movement fits the story. So, but it was a very cerebral process. He had a little screen in his head that he could see the dance full figure in his head. And then he would go in the next day and put that onto the dancers or on himself, or in the case of the puddles in the Sing in the Rain number, they're all choreographed. So he had to then go in and carve those puddles out of the street and hit those. And there's a note in the production notes that says that they had to stop and put sawdust in the puddles. So obviously that created a different effect with his foot hitting the water and everything. So it's this precision, this attention to detail that I think really distinguishes Jean. There wasn't one aspect of this whole business that he didn't pay attention to. He met with the Technicolor people to adjust the color. He met with the sound people, the musicians, all of the technical people, the camera operator, the cinematographers, obviously dancers and all. So it was a very involved process, but.
That's wonderful. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I think a lot of us, I still write notes and take notes and storyboard where dancers are going at what time and everything like that. That creative process definitely resonates with me, because that's a lot of how I work as a choreographer as well. Well, I guess it's my turn. We're going to stick with a little Singing in the Rain. And the Satin Dolls, although we have some incredible dancers, we also have singers in our group as well. And we have a few of us who sing and dance. So I'm going to do a little tribute to Jean and do a little singing and dancing this time. So here's a little Good Morning for you. Okay. Good morning, good morning. We've talked the whole night through. Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. It's great to stay up late. Good morning to you. When the band began to play, the stars were shining bright. Now the milkman's on his way, and it's too late to say goodnight. So good morning, sunbeams will soon smile through. Good morning to you and you and you and you. Good morning. We've gabbed the whole night through. Good morning to nothing could be grander than to be in Louisiana in the morning. It's great to stay up late. Good morning to I could just zip if it wasn't Mississippi. When we left the movie show, the future wasn't bright, but came the dawn, the show goes on, and I don't want to say goodnight. Good morning! Rainbows are shining through. Good morning. Bonjour! Buenos dias! Buongiorno! Good morning! Good morning to you.
That's great. That is great.
Thank you.
Nothing like a triple threat. It's nice to it's hard to find them. I mean, that's a very difficult thing. It's clicking. Are you hearing the strange clicking sound?
Let's see. Getting a little feedback? Is that better? Getting a little echo now.
It's almost like a metronome.
I know.
Oh, there it's gone.
There we go.
It's interesting. As I was watching that, you probably all know this, but the very funny thing, Gene thought that Gene Hagen Singing in the Rain was really the glue that held the picture together. He just adored Gene Hagen. They were very good friends. And the funny thing is that Gene Hagen, so this movie that is all about dubbing voices and everything, that when Gene Hagen, let's see, so when Debbie Reynolds is supposedly dubbing Gene Hagen's singing voice, it's actually a woman named Betty Noyce who is dubbing Debbie Reynolds' voice. And Debbie Reynolds is supposedly dubbing Gene Hagen's speaking voice. That is actually Gene Hagen's real voice. So when she says, "The stars turn cold," that's really Gene Hagen speaking. And Betty Noyce was uncredited. It's now been revealed that all the people who were people, but she sang the songs. At that point, Debbie was so young and didn't have the vocal range to do that, so I sang those. But Good Morning is Debbie singing. So all those little things.
That's incredible. Well, it's so wonderful to connect with you again, Patricia. We met 4 or 5 years ago.
That's starting in again. I don't know what the...
Hey, Devin. Sorry, you're up. Change your settings.
I haven't touched it at all. Is that...
I don't know if it's communicating network in you.
It's so weird.
Technical difficulty.
Well, ask a question and then I'll answer it.
Garland and Judy Garland. What was that? You know,
Jean, so the question was about Summer Stock, the movie Summer Stock, and being with Judy Garland, and whether I knew anything about that. And Gene loved Judy Garland, and he thought it's quite interesting, I think, that he thought she was the sexiest woman in Hollywood and also the brightest. And she never really gets credit for those things. You know, she really, in the newspaper, she was literally called a duckling. And but she was the one in, Gene did his first movie with her, For Me and My Gal, in 1942. And the director at the time, Busby Berkeley, really didn't want Gene in the picture. And so Gene said he wouldn't give him the time of day. So Gene said it was Judy led him through that and taught him how to perform in front of a camera. Because Gene came off of the Broadway stage and he assumed it was the same, that you performed the same stage as you do in front of the camera. And he realized very quickly that it's the timing is different, and also things like simple things like how you even sit down in a chair is different. You have to, he said Judy taught him to kind of scrunch down in front of the camera to go into a chair. And so he really credited her with career because she guided him through, and ultimately he became good friends with Busby Berkeley. But she was the one, and he said she had a sixth sense about where that was. She knew exactly where to turn and guided him with that. And then he said she had just this instant recall. So she knew every Tin Pan Alley song, every bit of popular music. And at one point, she and Gene kind of did this kind of, it was a song off, not a dance off, kind of a challenge, and that he would sing one bit and she would sing right back. And so they had this incredible relationship, and he just thought she was so bright. And they were supposed to do 4 movies together. They did For Me and My Gal, they did Summer Stock, they did The Pirate, and they were supposed to do Easter Parade together. And Gene had actually choreographed most of Easter Parade. And then on an afternoon, he was playing volleyball in his backyard, and he went up, he and a close friend of his both went up for the same ball, and his friend, Noel Howard, came down Gene's ankle and snapped it. And that's what took Gene out of Easter Parade. And the studio said, what do we do? What do we do? Because Gene couldn't get back to Dan in time. And he said, why don't you bring Fred Astaire out of retirement? And so Gene said that Fred actually called him to ask if it was okay that he replaced him. And Gene said, oh, no, I was the one who suggested you. So if you rerun Easter Parade, you will see Fred Astaire dancing to Gene Kelly's choreography. And when you then look at the rest of Fred Astaire's career, it changes. So you see him dancing things like Bandwagon. So instead of Gene being influenced by Astaire, it was actually Fred Astaire who was influenced by Gene. But getting back to Gene and Judy, by the time they got to Summer Stock in 1950, Judy was having a lot of problems, and Gene didn't want to do the movie initially because he thought it was kind of a silly idea for him to be playing this. Should have been Judy and Mickey Rooney as kids, but they said, no, Judy really needs you. She's in trouble, and he loved her, so said, absolutely, I'll do it. And I really, I love Summer Stock. I'm glad you asked about it because it's not screened that much, and I think it's kind of in sort of second class. But when I post things about it on Facebook, people love it. And I think that the chemistry between Gene and Judy in that movie is so palpable. And in fact, I include the You Wonderful You number in my shows because, it just takes my breath away when I see them. It's so believable because it's true. I mean, they felt that way for each other. But I think, and in terms of choreography, people always assume that something like the green dress, Sid Charisse in Singing in the Rain, that kind of slam bam dance is going to be the easiest thing, the hardest thing to choreograph. So, you know, the hardest thing is a kind of slow movement, and to make Judy Garland appear like a non-dancer, kind of a reticent non-dancer, that was much more difficult to choreograph than Sid Charisse in the green dress. But I love it. I think it's the funniest thing. I think Phil Silvers is another. Jean thought he was a comedic genius. And so I think Summer Stock is a lot of fun. Jean doing Dig for Your Dinner on the table, I mean, is phenomenal. And the barn, the dance that they do in the barn, which is kind of a challenge dance, I think is really charming. And I just, I was asking for people to screen it, but they tend to go with Singing in the Rain. And I love The Pirate too. I think The Pirate is a fantastic movie, and it's funny, you're either very hot or very cold about it. Some people love it. Liza Minnelli, I love it. I just think I think Gene, the wit and charm, his little twinkle in his eye, and the funny little whimsy and humor, and he loved playing it because he loved his hero as a little boy was Douglas Fairbanks. And so to be able to do all of these things like Three Musketeers and he actually studied fencing, but to play with swords or back and all these things, it was like a little boy's dream. So, but I think I just love watching the two of them. And the funny thing is, sit on a stool on stage while the clips are running in my shows. And a lot of times I turn around, I'm looking at them, and I forget I have to get up and go speak again because I get so caught up to two of them. So yeah, I love Summer Stock.
Well, I would love to ask you about the newspaper.
Oh yeah. I didn't even neglected the newspaper dance. So the newspaper dance actually was the idea of a choreographer named Nick Castle, and he invited Jean over to his house, and he said, Jean, I've got this great sound, and he tore a newspaper. And Jean said, I love that. And Jean said, well, why don't you put that in a number? And Nick said, no, I want you to have it. And but the thing is, Jean had the sound of the tearing of the newspaper, but he needed the contrapuntal sound, another sound. And so he went all around the studio, and they were kicking things. They started calling him Crazy Kelly because he was knocking into things, and it turned out there was only a newspaper. They had stacks of newspaper against the wall of the stage, and only one would tear properly. And I forget what year it was. And then Gene was going across the stage, and he hit a squeaky board, and that's when he found his other sound. And he said after, as we watched it, Gene didn't like his own movies. A lot of stars do. They just kind of loved seeing themselves. Gene didn't, because he would always see something he wished he had done better or differently. And so, but when we watched it, I forced him to watch it for our work, and we watched it, and he said, I didn't think about it at the time, but back I can see that Buster Keaton was a influence in that type of humor. But the newspaper dance is brilliant, and I show it in high schools and to young kids, and they all love it. And they say he looks so cool, he just looks like he just stepped out of a J. Crew hug or something. And those are his real clothes. That's how he dressed around the house. And same with I Got Rhythm in American Paris, the khaki pants and a Swiss scarf and a cap. Those are his own clothes. So unless he's doing a period piece like The Pirate or something, he's in what he generally would. That again was what Gene wanted to do in changing the look of dance, was create what's the look of an American male dancer. And he had the khaki pants, and he had them cut tight in on his thighs and his hips. So what the whole idea was to show the longest line body, but to also look like a regular guy. And so, because if he walks out in a ballet costume, in a leotard, I mean, that kind of blows the story. So he would create things. You'll see him in a, very tight purple t-shirt and black pants that are cut in tight. So it's as close to a line of a ballet form, but it's a guy. And so that's, if you pay attention to his clothes, you'll read that he wore white socks so that people see his feet, and that's not true. He just said it was nerdy to wear black socks with moccasins. So, and his moccasins were made, they were handmade of a supple leather so that he could bend his toe like a ballet slipper, and yet it looks like a regular moccasin. So, and he loved the paddle shoes. He loved that. And in fact, one day he just surprised me with a pair of them because he thought they looked great on women too. So he was a real true romantic. He sort of, the gifts were, they were things that people wouldn't ordinarily give somebody. You think about it, that somebody's going to give somebody dimes or something, and that wasn't Gene at all. It was, in fact, I have a couple of the things here. I brought them out. So he would give me these little Limoges boxes for birthday or for Valentine's Day or Christmas, and here's one. This is a little balloon, Montgolfier balloon. And then what he would do is I don't know if you can see, but he would take a little red pen and put a heart inside of the thing. So I'm doing this backwards. There it goes. Oh, there we go. So, and then little notes, he would leave little love notes around the house, or funny little notes. He'd cut out pictures from newspapers and magazines. He'd cut out pictures of monkeys on the refrigerator and draw an arrow and say you. And, I'd come down in the morning, I'd just be cracking up because it was just, yeah. They don't make them like this very often, I don't think. I always say that when you have somebody like Gene, or a Judy Garland, Frank Sinatra, these are comets that just shoot through our lives once, and you don't have them again. You don't recreate them. You do what you made doing, which is that you interpret the things and take it forward. And even the Good Morning was so brilliant because you didn't copy, you made it your own. And I love it. I just love it. And like I said, with the Sing in the Rain, I mean, it's so much more interesting to watch this. I mean, I could watch all day because you're adding your own story to it. I mean, you told another story, you told a different story with the Sing in the Rain, and yet you honor it's an homage, but you've gone further. So anyway.
That's incredible. For some reason, I'm really echoey, so I'm just going to get going with my.
Sounds good. Let's see it.
Oh.
I love how you have. It's great. Hi,
It's so fun.
it's so nice to meet you. Thanks for being with us. I've got a little. Is that better? Perfect. So I've got a little question. We did touch on it slightly, but I did read that Gene Kelly's from Summer Stock, You Wonderful You, was sort of his breakthrough almost, and in his career. And I was just going to ask why you think that is. I from your previous talk on You Wonderful You, I assume it's because it's actually quite a pared back number, and it's maybe not necessarily all about the choreo and more about the emotion. But what do you think? Why do you think that was his breakthrough sort of number?
That's interesting. I've never heard that. So, and interestingly, his breakthrough number came several years before that. His breakthrough was in CoverGirl when he was loaned out. MGM didn't know what to do with him. They ended up loaning him out as a trade to star opposite Rita Hayworth in CoverGirl. And it was the alter ego number where he dances with himself that was the thing that changed his career, because that was the first time that he really had been allowed to experiment with the camera the way that he wanted to. And the head of the studio, the director of CoverGirl, didn't think it was possible for Gene to dance with himself. And so he just shut down production, ended and went away. But the head of the studio, Harry Cohn, by that time really believed in Gene, and so he made that possible. And Gene said it was the hardest he ever did, because he had to dolly and pan in double exposure. And nowadays with a computer, you would just do the number once and then you'd just duplicate it. But then to actually do the number once, then they draped the entire set in black velvet, and he had to come back in and do the number and hit all of the marks in the dark and jump over himself over a pole and everything. So that came out in 1944, and Summer Stock is 1950. So it was that number in CoverGirl that then MGM finally woke up and said, oh, this guy has some talent, so maybe we should not loan him out anymore. And so then things began to open up at MGM, and he began to be able to choreograph and direct the pictures. So you had On the Town in 1949, and then you have American Paris in 1951. And so Summer Stock, I don't remember. I mean, that's an interesting. It is different because it is such an emotional playing. It's a people ask me all the time, well, did Gene ever do any acting? And I'm like, well, what do you think he's doing up there? But they don't understand that doing a number is telling the story. So I don't know. You'll have to let me know.
Well, I'm going to ask you happy.
Oh, well, that I can talk about. That's a great number.
Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? Let me just grab the music.
Come on, get happy. Let your cares away. Hallelujah, get happy. For the judgment day. Sunshine, come on, get happy.
That's that's a great. It's a great number, and that was shot. People always assume that that was shot and done for another picture, added on to summer stock, but in fact, it was shot later. They closed the production, and Judy did go off. She lost a lot of weight, and then came back to do that number. And the costume is the same for a piece that she did here, which is terrific. It's one of Jean's favorite costume looks, and he taught her how to canter hat on her head just like that. So you've got this great, it's a great look. But they got out of another picture, so it was nice that they put it in there. And that was Chuck Walters, Charles Walters choreographing that. What Jean performed was Jean. When you see Jean dancing, it's Jean's choreography, but that was Charles Walters.
Wonderful. So Patricia. Oh, I have a little echo now too. Let's see. Is that better? There we go. All right. So, question for you. Do you have a favorite performance of Jean's? What's your personal favorite?
People always ask me if I even have a favorite film, and so thank you for asking if there's a favorite performance, because I don't have a favorite film. I just love all these different performances. And I would have to say, I mean, the newspaper dance is definitely one of them. And I love several things. Higher at Nina, where he's, being the kind of funny, whimsical guy. I love I Got Rhythm with the kids. Tended to always use non-professional kids, so you get this really natural response. And let's see what tap roller skating number, and It's Always Fair Weather. I've never seen anybody do that, and interestingly, I've never seen anybody do the newspaper dance. Thank you for that. He would love this. I wish he were here, because he would be so happy seeing what you're doing. And but I haven't seen anybody do that. I've not seen anybody do the roller skating number. But Jerry the Mouse, I mean that's pretty charming. And the American in Paris ballet is so breathtakingly beautiful. So I think there's so many, and that's what I did in my show, is I just put my favorites in, and each shows a different style dancing and a different style of choreography to show the breadth of it, that he can do a perfectly classical ballet, but he can do a jazz number over here. He can do acrobatics. For example, Living in a Big Way, when he's up on the top of the building construction and he swings across. I love that. So, and people don't see that because it's not a great movie. I love them all. You have to come to my show, and then you'll see. And I use different ones in the two shows, because the one for the symphonic show shows the relationship between the dance and the music, and how Jean worked with composers and musicians and everything. So you can tap. You can tap on roller skates. Okay, that's the next one I'll see next time we do this.
Well, speaking of American in Paris, I wanted to ask you a few questions about that. What really stands out to me about that film is all of the ballet scenes that you were mentioning earlier. As dancers, I feel like most of us traditionally start out in ballet. And even though we all found our love with tap and we're tap dancers now, most of us do kind of train in all of the styles. And ballet is the foundation of all of that for most of us. So I was wondering if you could share any stories or share the significance of those ballet numbers compared to some of his other films.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that, because I think what's happening now is that so many people don't start ballet. They just start with modern dance or tap. And Jean always said, they'd go, Mr. Kelly, what should I study? And he said everything. And he meant every style of dance. And he meant history, literature, poetry, economic. I mean, he felt you needed to have this kind of well-rounded sensibility, but definitely ballet because of the line. He said that once you've once you understand the line of the body, you can begin to break the line. But if you don't know that core, then it's kind of a mess. So for American in Paris, and Jean, the director of the movie is Vincent Minnelli, and Jean is the choreographer. But for the ballet, the 17.5-minute ballet, Jean is the director of that. He's the named director. So he's behind the camera calling the shots on that. Now, sometimes you'll read that people say, well, there's no story to it or anything. It's this, each of the sections of the ballet, it's to show an emotion of this young man, this young American in Paris. And he shows his feelings about a young girl through various impressionist painters. And so each segment is basically a tribute to a particular painter. So the big cyclorama, when you have the fountain, that's Dufy. And they actually recreated one of his paintings around this fountain. And then you have the flower market is Renoir. And you have Van Gogh, obviously, when you have all the characters sitting in the bar and Jean come through. You have Utrio, you have Rousseau in the scene where the 4 men come in the striped jackets, straw hats, and then you have the girls in the very beautiful dresses, striped ribbon dresses with the little white gloves. And so the men come in, and it's like Jem Cohan. They all come in dancing, and it signals immediately American. Whenever you tap dance, Jean said, whenever you put tap in a movie, it's American. And so you can't have tap dancing in The Pirate because it's the West Indies at the turn of the century. It doesn't fit. You have to use the style of dance that fits the story. So those Americans come in, and then you have the girls all on point, and those are like to signal little white birds, their white gloves, and so they're very classically French, and so they come together, have the American and the French. So you don't need to say that. It's the music and the dance tell the audience that. And the thing that moves through the pompiers, the French firemen, are the kind of connective tissue they move throughout. But it's all an emotional thing. It's all to show he is feeling about her, and as he kind of moves through, finds her, loses her, finds her, and but we ran that, and Jean said at the end of that, he said, I am proud of that. And I think it holds up. I mean, it's a beautiful piece. At the end of his life, that was something that he wanted to recreate with San Francisco Ballet, actually, with the 3 tenors performance. But he wanted different pairs. He wanted to use, instead of just 2, he wanted different pairs doing each thing. But sadly, that never came to be. But he was very proud of that, and to work with Gershwin music. I mean, he loved. Jean and Gershwin were very similar. They never met because Gershwin died so young. But Jean was trying to create a particularly American style of dance, and Gershwin was trying to create a particular American sound. So you put those 2 together, and so. Any more specific question that you have about that, or?
No, I mean, that was amazing just to hear about, like you mentioned earlier, his thought behind the storytelling and the storyboarding and that whole process of creating such a big scene like that. Hearing behind the scenes is just amazing. I did have one other question about American in Paris for you. You mentioned in I've Got Rhythm, which I'll be showing you my version in just a second. There's the child performers in that number, and they are just the cutest things, and you can tell. I always giggle when I watch it, and I watched it a lot this week in preparation for this, that the song's called I've Got Rhythm, but the kids are not on rhythm because they say I've got, and he's like trying to interact with them and get it to work, and it's just the cutest, most endearing. You can tell that he really loves interacting with those kids. So I was just curious if there was any funny stories from behind the scenes, specifically with that number and his interactions with the children?
No, that's a great question, because as I said, Gene always preferred working with non-professional kids because there was a naturalness to it. He said it's obviously easier to work with professional kids, but you get this response. And I think so they're saying I got rhythm is kind of a perfect example. And those are real French immigrant kids. He just had them rope in a batch of kids, and it's actually a little boy who might make you laugh the most. He's got looks like dress on, but it's actually a little boy, and he's sitting up on the wall, and he's the one that Gene turns to, and then he says, "I got," and then a man named Lucien Plazeau, and he actually ran a French bookstore here in Westwood for years. And I met him at a party, and he came to the premiere show with his wife. And so some of those kids are still alive, but you do get this completely natural thing. And in my symphony show, I found, as I was going through all the recordings that exist, I found Gene rehearsing with those kids, and that's part of the show. And I get them, they'll say, "I got," and then they go, "I got," and then he'll go, no. And he's speaking French to them, and then he says, no, and then "I got," and then the little kid will go, "I got," and then finally he goes, "I got," and then you get the one that is in the show. So it's so charming. And Gene went to Ira Gershwin to get permission to change the lyrics so that he could include the kids, and Gershwin trusted Gene and gave permission for that. So,
thank you so much. That is the perfect segue for me to share I Got Rhythm with all of you. Okay.
Wonderful.
it's really fun.
Well, Patricia, we have really enjoyed our time with you today. It has been so lovely getting to know you and learning more about Gene Kelly. And I think it's so incredibly beautiful how you are continuing his legacy. And if anybody is interested, please go to her Instagram that she runs. It is Gene Kelly Legacy, and there's pictures and stories, and it's really, really incredible. Great. I loved, like, I spent probably an hour scrolling through it yesterday, just reading stories and everything. We really just love reading your posts about him, and your writing is incredible. And where else? So that's your Instagram. Where else can we maybe find out more about his legacy? I know your shows when we're able to finally go to theaters again. I can't wait to get to one of those. So.
I know, because like I say, we were set to have, we were actually with the London Philharmonic at Festival Hall for next March, and that will have to get posted, but it will definitely come to London and all across the UK. The Gene Kelly, The Legacy on Facebook, if people are only on Facebook, I post there, I'm on LinkedIn, and then, but everyone, please feel free to send me a note because I do respond. And if you don't hear from me, it means I didn't get it. So just keep poking me. I don't mind that. And my email is Patricia Kelly at GeneKelly.com. Sorry, Patricia Kelly at GeneKelly.com. So, and I hope to get the official website up and going. It's GeneKelly.com. And then I will be posting on that all of the shows and everything once we get everything going. But what I really love is exactly what we're doing, because even in my shows, I greet everybody as they arrive. So I shake hands with 1,000 people, and then I stay after the show and it's not really a show. It's more of a conversation. It's more like this. It's really more, the tone is exactly this. And it's, what I feel is, and Gene said this, I was just retyping some of my notes, the early interview I did with him, and he was talking about appearing on the Broadway stage. And he said that he always preferred the stage to movies because he loved the interaction with the audience. And he said, there are two people. He said, there's you, and then there's the audience member. And when I read that, I'd forgotten that he said that, but since I've been doing the shows, I really feel that, and they're all extemporaneous. So I'm listening to the audience. I can hear them laugh. I hear them cry. I hear them out, oh, that's Sid Charisse or something. And so I can kind of move with the audience, but I feel like it's that connection. This isn't a one-way thing. It's not, and it's interesting because people will come out of my show and they'll say, I don't know how you do that. That's so emotional and everything. And the thing is, it's very selfishly, interaction with people like you is what allows me to deal with the loss of Gene. So by your connecting, it helps that absence, because he's gone, but in a sense, the spirit of this incredible man, this incredibly decent human man with great humanity and integrity, and gets to go forward and in a really beautiful way. So I feel like that's what it's about. And as I was watching your performances, that's what you're doing. You're not just up there tap dancing for yourself and in some kind of closed way. Everything you're doing is reaching out to me and the audience as an audience member. And that's it's that personality that comes through. And Gene said that's the core of it. If you don't have that, then it's not connecting with the audience. And I see a lot of performers who do that. They just get up and in fact, will even turn away from the audience. And that, to me, isn't what it's about, nor was it to Gene. It was about that connection. So I felt it with every one of you. And I can't wait to see you. I mean, I can't see the whole performance. You've got to just let me know where it is, and I'll be there.
Well, as soon as we can get back out performing again, we'll definitely be the first person on our invite list. That's for sure.
I want to show you this, so you can see what I used to look like. Let's see if how do I get that on there? So this is the first time I ever went out in public with Gene at an event. And look, he's giving a thumbs up, fortunately. And it looks like the tabloids after said that I'm wearing $1 million necklace or something. It's an $8 paste necklace. And my mother looked at it and saw that I was on the cover of the tabloid at the grocery store. And she said, "Oh, you look like a deer in the headlights." I said, "Oh, thanks, Mom." Because I'd never experienced anything like paparazzi and people taking pictures and everything. And I was just like, I wasn't made for this. But now, I think about it. It's so funny because I think, what like I say, my 61-year-old body, what I could do now, I have so much more confidence I could do it, but I was just like, but I'm glad I got a thumbs up. Oh, and I have one last thing. Then these are his, I think I've seen these, Vera, the tennis shoes, his Converse tennis shoes. So he wore these, and you specifically see them when he was directing Holly. So he's up on the boom and you can see him in his Converse, and that's what he wore around the house. He loved those. And so and then this one, I'll show you this. This is a tankard, and it says, "Gene, the best movie maker I know, with affection, Frank, tax date 1967. So that was his buddy, Frank Sinatra. Gene said they were closer than brothers, and Frank was really helpful to me at the end of Gene's life, and really dear, sweet man, not the public image that you see, but really kind and very generous. So yeah, well, you have to come for a toaster dinner. I think all of the Satin Dolls need to be here. Vera, you can lead the way. You will have already done it, but
yes. Oh, Patricia, I just want to say from the bottom of all our hearts, I think for all of it. Thank you so much. This was just a real treat, and we appreciate you spending time with us today. And we love Gene, and we love the legacy that you're continuing, and we love continuing his legacy. So thank you so much.
Well, make sure we're all connected and communicating, so that and do reach out and let me know when you open up, and you'll see when the shows are touring across the US and definitely the UK. Wales has rebooked for September of next year, so it's Cardiff and Swansea, and so things will happen. But just I'm so proud of you for. This is a very hard time for you. I mean, this is really tricky, and I really, my hat is off to you, because I have this incredible project that I can do here, but you're performing and not down. So I appreciate that you're continuing to keep the spirit up and everything. So congratulations on that, and I look forward to seeing you all in person next time, or I'm happy to do this anytime if you have more questions. So just don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Patricia. We really appreciate you, and thank you for all of our fans tuning in today. This is a real treat. I'm going to have to go back and watch it, because I'm just so overwhelmed with all of the incredible information. I probably need to watch it again. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all again soon.
Good. Thank you. Reach out. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Patricia.
Okay, I'll mute my